Hello, everyone. I'm Raga D'silva, your host for Older Queer Voices podcast. Today's guest is super interesting. Jo Rzymowska, an MBE, an absolute trailblazer in global travel, a senior business leader, and one of the most visible LGBTQ plus executives in the UK. Jo's career spans more than 40 years, including leadership roles at companies like Celebrity Cruises, Thomas Cook, and Disney. In 2025, Jo was awarded an MBE for her services to diversity and inclusion, recognizing a career that combined commercial success with meaningful cultural change. Well, one of the things that's very interesting is that Jo is also very open about her personal journey from hiding her sexuality early in her career to becoming a visible and vocal queer, leader. She now works as a mentor, non-executive director, and founder of a consultancy, Jovolution, which I love. I love the name. So welcome, Jo.
Thank you very much, Raga. It's wonderful to be with you. Thank you for inviting me.
Jo, I know you lead a very, very fast-paced life, even now, because I've been trying to get work time with you. And I am absolutely delighted that you agreed to be on this podcast. So thank you again. And
Thank you.
as usual, our listeners are important to us. So, and some of them may not know of your journey. So I just want to start at the beginning.
Sure.
Let's start with Jo as a younger person.
Mhm.
What got you into what you are doing right now? So we'll just start with that.
Well, I studied languages. So as I said, I used to be able to work in German, eat in French, and drink in Spanish, and now I can just drink in all of them. But I studied languages, and my mother was a German Jew refugee from Berlin, came over on the kinder transport. Her parents sadly never got out, so she was an orphan from the age of 14. And my father was in the Warsaw Uprising, hence my Polish surname, and fought in the uprising, survived. And they both ended up as refugees in London. And therefore, I had a very continental European upbringing. Sadly, they actually couldn't. I say sadly, I can also say luckily, they couldn't have children themselves. My father was very ill when he was in the concentration camp, so they adopted my brother and I. So I had a very European upbringing. We had very simple holidays, a lot in the UK, but when we did, we often went camping. We went to see my grandmother, who still survived in Warsaw. No German family survived. And then my aunt and uncle lived in Nigeria. So at the age of 10, I went on my own to Nigeria to visit them as a unaccompanied minor, from London to Lagos, Kano, Kaduna. And that was my first ever experience of such a different culture. And I had no fear. I don't know why, but I didn't. I had no fear. And I think it was the start of my journey. So you put my parents' background together with the languages that I always heard in the house, together with traveling at such a young age to such a different culture. And that started my love of Africa, of people, of different food, of different cultures.
Wow. That is fascinating. So I'm just thinking Born to Travel. I was wondering what's the title we'll give you. And I'm thinking Born to Travel sounds like really like like you. But do you think that your early days shaped your journey from where you are now?
Oh, very much so. Yes, without a doubt. I'm pretty much at a very. I obviously studied. I did business studies and travel and tourism. So I pretty much knew that I wanted to go into the travel industry as a career, because why wouldn't you? I mean, I love people genuinely. I love different cultures. I love different foods. I knew I could never be Miss World, so I thought, well, why not go into the travel industry? But I was very focused on joining, not just as an overseas rep, which is how I started, which was a great grounding. But I wanted to make sure that I worked in lots of different sectors of the industry, so I really broadened my horizon. And that's what I did. That's what I did.
So when you say different sectors, is it because you wanted to make this a career and you wanted to have all kinds of experiences, or is it
Yeah.
something else?
No, it is. It's so I started, as I said, working as an overseas rep. So what did you? So I worked summers in Mallorca, and I worked winters in Austria skiing. I love skiing as well, so that was an absolute joy for me. And in my first season, I don't know if you remember the film Four Weddings and a Funeral.
Yes, yes, I do.
Yeah, with Hugh Grant. Well, in my first season, I had a murder, a birth, and four deaths to contend with. And that really, I thought I was going to Mallorca, but I thought I was going to the sun. I was going to be with people who are on holiday. Nothing would go wrong, and everything went wrong. Everything went wrong, and it was
Wow.
way before. This was in the early 80s. It was way before consumer rights or customer satisfaction surveys or really ensuring that the hotel properties were to a good standard. And during that time, as I said, I had to deal with three clients who died, unfortunately, on motorbike accidents. A girl who thought she had a hangover but was actually pregnant and delivered a baby in the hotel bathroom. And an older guy who had angina. So I grew up, I was only 20, 21. I had no support from the company really at that stage, but I had to look after the families and look after people. And that was my first really entree into thinking customer service is so important, and looking after the customer and making sure that the customer is king or queen and that we do everything to look after them. So I immediately then wanted to understand more about how we look after customers better, how we train staff better to make sure that people are prepared to handle different situations. And I really then got into training of overseas staff and the reps in resort. So I knew very early on that I wanted to then gain different experience in different sectors. I had quite a commercial brain as well. So I knew, as well as wanted to care for the customers and the people working for the organization, that businesses are about making money. And I had no qualms in that, as long as it's done in the right way.
Wow, Joe, but at 2021, none of us are that resilient because this can be very daunting, this kind of an
Yeah,
experience. And
yeah,
like you said, maybe there was not much training before. At 2021, really, you're just learning, you're just understanding
correct.
the world. Did it not put you off, or did it give you more, like you said, you started thinking about more about customer service, then thinking, oh my God, this travel industry is not for me?
No, I mean, I actually received a letter from the managing director of the company saying that you seem to have taken to this job like a duck to water. Where would you like to go next? So I actually found it, I mean, obviously dealing with those very difficult situations was horrendous and very upsetting. And I didn't enjoy it. But I actually knew that it made me love the industry more and more, and I wanted to stay in the industry, and I didn't want to back away from it. It really, as I said, it made me realise how important it is to have good teamwork, good colleagues, good processes, good procedures, and I knew that I could add some. Even at that young age, I knew that this is an industry that I wanted to stay in and that I wanted to contribute to. And ultimately, people are going on holiday. They do want to have a good time, but they want to have a safe time. And therefore, there's something joyous about seeing people arrive somewhat frazzled, needing that. In those days, it was a 2-week break that people had really saved up for the rest of the 50 years of 50 weeks of the year, and then they leave feeling refreshed, having made new friends, new family connections, and it's a wonderful feeling.
I can see that you actually enjoy the experience of the people having a great experience. I can just see that in your
Yeah,
face, the way that's great. So I just want to come back to now something a little different. I want
yeah,
to understand the word queer. We call a podcast older queer voices, and there's a reason
yes,
why I'm asking you this. How do you
sure,
feel about being a queer person now? Because I know very early on in your career, you kind
yeah.
of hid your sexuality. So two
Oh,
questions
yeah.
here. Yeah.
Well, I mean, to be honest, Ragged, the word itself for me is still makes me judder because I've had to. I know it's wonderful that the LGBTQ plus community have regained the term queer. But when I was growing up, it was a very, very derogatory term. You know, when I first realized my sexuality and when I was in the closet, you know, the word queer was a very derogatory term. So still to this day, I find it quite difficult from my own point of view to say queer woman. I would still use the term that I'm a gay woman. And
You're
that's
gay.
interesting, isn't it?
Very.
So, as I said, the term in itself, but that's how jarring it was, because immediately you felt exposed, you felt that your eyes were on you and that potentially you were at risk. And, you know, this is in the late 80s, early 90s. And, you know, I was pretty much in the closet until I was 40. So
Oh,
until
wow.
late 90s, I went through the first, 15 plus years of my career not being out at all and hiding my sexuality, other than to very close friends. And I honestly never thought that I would. I thought I would spend the whole of my career until I was the age that I am now, not being my true self at work. I just didn't think it was going to be possible.
So,
So how the world has changed.
it surely has. But was it the fear of being from the LGBTQ, what we call the community now,
Yeah.
or was it fear of, say, maybe losing your job or being judged by your workplace?
It was really all of the above, I would say. So I would say the biggest thing from a work point of view was my job, that I thought I would be at risk if people knew that I was gay. And I don't think I'm probably wrong. And in fact, when I talk to friends of mine today who've been with you, and I'm joy that I've got a friendship network that goes back over many years. I think that could well have been the case. And I remember when I told my father, and I told my father when I was 30, and I remember he said to me, "I love you. I'll always love you, but just be careful in the boardroom." You know, he could see then I was definitely building a successful career, even though I was at quite a young age. And he was an entrepreneur and he had his own business. And I think he could tell that I was going to have a good career. And he just said, don't allow yourself to be the butt of jokes. And he also made a comment which I thought was interesting, especially in the travel industry, because of course there were gay men, you know, was quite prolific in the travel industry, but I didn't know any gay women. And he just said to me, you know, straight women love gay men, but there's not many straight men who love gay women.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. And I think is that true now as well? I'm just thinking when
I think it could be.
2026.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think probably less so, but certainly when he said that to me, as I said, in the late 80s, early 90s, and he did it through love and he did it through care.
Sure.
And it did make me, so that probably made me even more nervous as well. And I was nervous of what people would think, what people would say. And also, I didn't want to potentially, even though my father in particular was very good about it, my mother found it more challenging. I didn't particularly want to upset them.
Sure. Sure. I'm just trying to go back into the 80s and 90s, that world that, I got into the industry, my advertising industry in the early 90s,
Yeah.
which was quite liberal, even in India. I mean, you could see two gay men together, and it was common, quite common. A graphic designer, for instance, and a copywriter who worked together, typically were a couple, and gay
Yeah.
men. But I had never seen a gay woman, like you said. I'd never
Yes.
seen, I didn't even know they existed. I didn't even know the
Yes.
word, for instance, the word lesbian, which we
Right.
so openly and easily say. So were you aware of those words, those terms, for instance? And two is, why did it take you 10 years after you started working to tell your father?
Well, yes. So yes, I was aware of the terms and the words.
Okay.
Um, I didn't actually. I did. So I didn't. Growing up, we didn't. I didn't know, or within my circle of friends, I didn't know of any gay men, and certainly no gay women within my circle of friends. and within our family, and the family had lots of friends. We've only got a small family because of what happened to our families being refugees, but certainly we had a big circle of friends. And amongst that circle, there was no one knowingly of my parents' generation or my generation who were gay. So therefore, the first foray, if you like, into the LGBTQ community was when I was overseas repping. And that's when I first, as I said, when I met gay men, but I didn't meet any gay. In fact, I met one gay woman. Who was, and again, she was the talk of the island in Mallorca. That, wow, did you know that such and such is a lesbian? And it was interesting that felt more derogatory than being a gay man, or more exposed than being a gay man. And that's another thing I think that made me feel nervous and frightened.
Sure. So by then you had come out to yourself? You were aware that you were a gay woman?
I was not fully, no, but I was, I mean, I was in my mid-20s, mid to late 20s when I absolutely knew that this wasn't a phase, as my mother hoped that it was, and that I was gay. Yeah.
Yeah, so when there was no representation, no visibility, no other lesbians other than that one person who obviously her story had traveled differently to what
Yeah.
it is now, right? So at that time, were you fully aware that maybe you could be the talk of the town, for instance, and people will
Correct.
talk? Yeah, you felt that,
Yes.
is it?
And
Okay,
that therefore made me try to block it even more,
sure.
and tried, even from my own point of view, say, wow, I mean, perhaps how, to me at the time, it was a really, really, I couldn't think of anything worse. That's how it felt. I thought, how am I going to live the rest of my life, always being hidden, because I
Yeah.
couldn't imagine being in a relationship, let alone in a career, and let alone then be recognized for the work that I've done in diversity and inclusion. I mean, that was just a million miles away. I just thought, how am I going to cope living a lie? How am I going to cope living a lie?
And you were thinking about these things because the reason I ask this, Joe, because a lot of people who when I'm on their podcast as a guest, they think these decisions are quite easy once you've made a decision within yourself, and they think it happens overnight. They ask me, when was that time when it changed for you? It doesn't happen overnight, right? There's a lot
Yeah,
of, I say,
yeah,
there's a curiosity phase, there's a confusion phase, there's a
yeah,
self-blame phase when you're saying,
yeah,
my God, what have I done to myself?
yeah.
I'm not normal. Those kind of things, you feel like a misfit. So
Yes.
did you also relate to something like this where you went through this confusion and
Oh,
the
yeah. And
unknowing,
actually,
basically?
I absolutely, and hope that I actually could change potentially, and that I could, could I actually lead a heterosexual life? And okay, I'd know that it wasn't absolutely right for me, but could I lead quite a happy life, and it would all go away?
Wow. So
So
when
I absolutely did think that.
Yeah. So when that so I'm going through the realization, your
Yeah, yeah,
self-realization, then you've come through and come out to your father, for instance, and I'm sure we'll talk about your mom as well, coming out to your mom as well
yeah.
soon. And then you have obviously said to yourself, that's it, this is enough. Now I'm going to let people know. Did that happen
Well,
when you
no,
at
no,
40? No.
I then spoke to a few very close friends, or interestingly enough, I found it more difficult to talk to people who'd known me for a very long time than to talk to people, to talk to people who I only recently met. And the reason being is I had less to lose with them. I didn't want to have the risk of losing these really good friendships that I'd been with since I was 4, 5, 6, 10 throughout school, all of whom, by the way, are brilliant friends today. To me, that was a big risk. Whereas if I met people now being when I was in my late 20s, early 30s, and then they either found out or knew that I was gay and they didn't like it, I was like, okay, well, I haven't got so much to lose because I haven't known them that long. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. And I can relate to that as well. You know, it's
Yeah,
easier sometimes with strangers than with your own people because I went through
correct,
that exactly that. I just didn't want to tell
correct,
my siblings. I didn't want to tell my
correct.
close friends. In fact, there's a story around this, and we'll talk about it when we meet in person. And so, so at why did you come out to your father at all when you are still not sure? And then when did you come out to your mom?
Well, actually, I came out to my mother first, and that was a
Okay.
bit through anger, actually, because that was a shame because I've got a lot of friends, and still to this day have a lot of friends. As I said, I love people, and I was probably going to 10, 15, 20 weddings a year. I mean, it was just wedding after wedding after wedding, and I was ending up absolutely. I hate to say it, it was lovely, of course, to be at the weddings. I was very happy for my friends, but it was getting more and more difficult because every time it was, oh, well, you'll be next, you'll be next, you'll be next. And when's it yours? And when are you going to find a nice man and settle down, etc., etc. And of course, it was difficult. My parents, my friends loved my parents, and my parents were always included in all of these weddings, which is lovely because our house was a wonderful open house. And however, it made it more difficult because each time I could see the pain on my mother's face in particular. And there was one time when I think we were getting ready or planning to go to another wedding. And I think she then said, you know, one day it will be yours. And I turned around in anger and said, I'm afraid it won't. It just won't. And so I always felt bad about that because I just reached a boiling point. I think there was just too much in me of keeping it suppressed. And I just blurted it out. And that was tough. And she then actually told my father.
Okay. And she
And then
wanted it. Yeah.
my father and I then spoke about it. And he was always, I think it broke her heart. I think because they had been through so much, they both lost their families. They then couldn't have kids. They'd adopted my brother and I. Sadly, my brother was schizophrenic. So they were relying on me to be, you know, I would be the one. If anybody should have been grandparents, they should have been grandparents. And of course, in those days, you couldn't even think about having children. I mean, that was just a no-no. Once you said you were gay, that was it. It meant that, I mean, I know a few real hardcore activists did, but most gay men and women did not have children then. Of course, now again, the world's very different.
Is it also, I'm just trying to think about this from a lesbian or gay woman's point of view. I mean, when we went out and told our parents, came out to our parents
Yeah.
or friends, one of the things that I heard quite commonly was shame. I felt shame. I felt shame for myself as well. Oh my God, I am this person that
Mm,
can't fit into this society. So that was a lot of shame that I was carrying. And I could sense that, for instance, my mother felt shame on behalf of me as well. And she said, what is society going to say? What are people going to say? How are we going to show our face as dishonor, you know? So
mhm.
did you sense that coming from your parents as well? Or was it just protectiveness
So,
towards you?
so from my point of view, it's less shame. It was more guilt. From my
Ah,
point of view, it was feeling guilty because I felt I'd let them down. So, but I didn't feel shame in myself. Actually, I've never felt that. Um, Probably because it just felt right. I knew that that was me, but I felt guilt towards them, and
sure.
and and from their point of view, I wouldn't say there was shame with my father at all. I think their biggest thing was, oh my God, life is going to be so much tougher for her. I think there was a genuine concern that life is difficult anyway, and
Yeah,
boy, have they been through difficult lives. And why are you making your life even more difficult than you need to? So I
sure.
think there was from their side, I think there was this, why are you doing this to yourself?
Yeah.
Opposed to really understanding that you have no choice. You are who you are.
Yeah. Interesting.
I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
from my mother's point of view, that was mixed with the upset and and probably shame of, what the what will the neighbours say, what will the friends say, what will people think, and how am I going to? And well, in fact, from her side of it, one of the reasons I kept it quiet for as long as I did was really because of my mother.
Sure. I think that
Really,
that's their biggest fear, right? I mean, the
yeah,
conversations I've had with others is one about legacy, how we
yeah,
need to, make sure that we leave something behind, the grandchildren, for instance.
yeah,
Two
yeah,
is like guilt and shame. I'm glad that in your case, shame wasn't that prevalent.
yeah,
But it's always the fear of society, whether it's your neighbors or strangers, we don't even know what will they say,
yeah.
and the challenges of life as a gay person. So
Correct.
it's that,
Yes,
right? Now,
yes.
so knowing all this,
Hmm.
knowing that while you had support at home and at the same time, you were challenged a bit. So what happened to you at work, and when did you come out, and when did things start changing for you at work?
Well, I was working for Disney, and that's when I really learnt the joys of the power of a brand, and working for an incredible brand. And I was then heading towards my late 30s, as I said, from a work point of view. And it was about the people. It was about the people around me. I made really good friends at work. My boss at the time was wonderful. He's probably the campus straight man that I know. Father, very happily married, father of 4 children, still a great friend to this day. And he and I were in business in Amsterdam. We went out one evening to a great restaurant in Amsterdam, and it was all gender neutral toilets. I mean, I'd never seen that before. The LGBT flag at that time was flying, and we just got talking. We got talking, and he gave me I just felt safe, and I knew I could be completely honest with him. Again, by now, lots of people were assuming. I'd heard the rumor that some journalists said with affection, apparently, had said, "Oh yes, the wonderful Disney dyke." Um, so, the rumors were out there. I knew that, and he gave me, if you like, the security and the safety to be honest with him. And it was a very emotional evening. And I think to this day, as I said, he's still a wonderful, wonderful friend. I've always been able to talk to him about lots of things, business and personal. And that's really gave me that confidence. And he just said, "Look, Jo, everybody loves you. Just be who you are." And of course, once you open that pressure cooker, once you open the lid of the pressure cooker, and there's no truer a phrase than if you bring your true self to work,
Yeah.
you prosper and everybody else around you does. Because actually, it's quite insulting to other people when they know what you know, and you know that they know what you know, and none of you are talking about it. And I actually felt I was probably being disrespectful towards them by
Sure.
not being true to who I was. So the issue in those days was, of course, is that each time you said it, you had to make a statement, you had to come out. And that was always quite exhausting. And then you got all the questions, so how, who, why, when did you, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So whereas nowadays, the joy of the younger generation, they don't really have to come out.
Yeah.
In not in all, obviously. I'm
Yeah.
talking in different cultures, it's very different. But
Sure.
not as much in some cultures as, well, certainly as you used to have to each time you made a statement. So, but it did make a difference. Or that from all of the companies I've worked with, probably Disney and Royal Caribbean Group, where I've still got the significant number of friends. In fact, throughout my career, I've remained friends with a lot of co-workers. So that was really the start of a new journey. And then when I joined Royal Caribbean Group, I joined as a gay woman. So
Oh,
right
brilliant.
from go-get, I was who I am. And that made a massive difference as well. So there was no lying, there was no hiding. I joined the company in 2005, and I ended up having a wonderful 20-year career at Royal Caribbean Group, being free to be me. And actually, their motto is "free to be me." And
Oh,
and I absolutely am. Was.
wow.
Yeah.
So when you say that when you joined the Royal Caribbean, you joined as a gay woman. So tell me, what does that mean? Joined as a gay woman.
Well, what it meant is that I spoke about my life, I spoke about my partner, I didn't hide who I was.
Excellent.
Whereas
Excellent.
whereas beforehand, I absolutely would have done. I absolutely would have done. So right from the go-get, they knew that my partner was Lynn. They knew that. So I just spoke naturally, as you would do in a natural conversation.
So you were not carrying that extra baggage of fear of
Correct.
someone finding out, and you were
Correct.
fully yourself, which is what we talk about these days. Bring
Yeah.
your full self to work. And
Correct.
to listeners who are listening, this is what we mean when we say bring your
Yeah.
full self to work, because your career of 20 years, I'm sure it pivoted, and it kind of gave you the confidence to be yourself. And I keep saying this to all organizations as well: when you are able to bring your full self to work, productivity levels also increase. At the end of the day,
Correct.
the top line, bottom line, everything gets impacted
Yeah.
positively. So did you see that happening? Did you feel that because you had now been out to yourself, been out to the organization, that you were able to give more to the organization and more of yourself, I mean?
Yeah. I think I definitely think so. I think in some ways it surprises me that even though I suppressed who I really was, I guess that I did as well as I did, but it definitely makes a difference when I was able then to be my true, authentic self. I think the biggest impact is in team and the people around you and allowing them into you more. And I think that is the biggest. I think I became a better leader as a result.
Brilliant. So what is
And
it? Sorry, go on.
yeah, no, I think by being true to myself and allowing them to get to know me, the true Joe, which includes what Joe got up to at the weekend, as well as what Joe was like in business. I think it enabled me to be a more genuine and a more personable leader.
Sure. So do
Because
you
leadership as well in the late 80s, early 90s was very autocratic, it's far more autocratic as well. It was very male autocratic. So just being a woman was as a leader was one thing, let alone then being a gay woman on top of that. And as I always say, I'm not proud of some of my moments during that time frame, because I think in order to survive, I don't think, I know some of my behaviors at times was, if you can't beat them, join them.
sure.
And they were leadership traits that nobody likes
Yeah.
being on the receiving end of. And certainly I was always very aware of that. And I think that as I then got older and was true, now 25 years of being true to myself in business, I think it makes me. I'm by no means perfect, but I know when I'm not being perfect.
Sure.
I'm very self-aware. I know
Yeah.
when I think, oh God, I could have handled that a lot better.
Yeah, I think life is about that, isn't it? Learning
Yeah,
and growing. Yeah, and we all
yeah,
make mistakes,
yeah.
and that's how life is. I just wanted to understand, what is the difference you think you were able to make in the early days and over time to inclusion and diversity, for instance? Did you bring, I'm sure you brought in new policies, new ways of doing things, and so being more inclusive. Can you give us a couple of examples?
Well, I think because, as I said, when I joined the Royal Caribbean group, I joined completely as myself, and also as as they said, free to be me is a true motto. This is an organisation, wow, 100,000 people around the globe, most of whom, of course, are on the ships. Only over 70 different nationalities on the ships, all working together from different cultures, different religions, different ethnicity, different sexual orientations. And I think the organisation within their DNA, and this is the group, and Celebrity Cruises was the brand that I ended up heading up in Europe. The culture really encouraged people to be themselves, and the culture encouraged integrity and diversity, and trust. And on board the ships, we had, they used to be called Friends of Dorothy gatherings, But of course, the younger generation didn't know what Friends of Dorothy was. So they switched to LGBTQ plus gatherings. And, you know, the cruise industry overall is very inclusive. Many other cruise lines do that as well. And so that immediately means that it's for the LGBT community, it's like, wow, this could be a holiday for me.
Yeah.
And knowing that they would be treated with respect and the same way as everybody else. So that was a big. The Pride at Sea programs were significant programs that we set up across all of the fleet, in the Celebrity Cruises fleet during Pride Month, and they weren't just for the LGBTQ plus community. Everybody came along. You know, it was about. So I would say it was very clear that as an organisation, that we attracted guests. We like to call them guests as opposed to customers, who actually appreciated different cultures, different thoughts, different ways of being, and were very happy to mix with different people. And of course, when you're a brand that actually stands for something, you're very clear on your purpose, and that people are really important. I call it the 3 Ps. I think if you're focused on your purpose, not just on the commercial side of things, what you stand for, genuinely focused on your people and making sure that they feel that they belong, greater profit does follow.
Yep.
And therefore, those who potentially were not in agreement with an organisation that was so happy to be very open and clear on its purpose, then people might think, well, that's probably not the brand for me.
So did you encounter any kind of resistance while you were building this, creating this, being so inclusive?
Well, from my point of view, I was blessed because the overarching president in Lisa Lutoff-Perlo was such an inclusive leader. So that I knew that there was real encouragement there to be free to be me, genuinely. So that made a big difference for me. When we were setting up some of the networks, be it the Network of Women, the LGBTQ network, or the Employee Resource Group networks that we set up, interestingly enough, there were a couple of white male straight colleagues who then said, well, which one do I belong in? And I thought, well, welcome to our world. So I think you belong in a big world out there. But no, I'd have to say that overall there was great because there was great allyship and great support, and people learned a lot. So people learned a lot when they joined the different groups, even if they weren't a part of that group, because those who genuinely wanted to listen to people and understand the different journeys that people have gone through, it was a benefit all round. It really was. So, for example, during different religious holidays, at Ramadan, people then spoke about what Ramadan means. Then at Eid, people brought in different offerings of food, and people learn, and that's what's important, right?
Yeah, that's excellent. I mean, who would think about these? I mean, I couldn't even be thinking about these things, but you have created change. That is what I can see. And, I'm just going to come back to something that you spoke.
As I said, it takes a village. I mean, it's a whole. It was a real teamwork, team effort.
The team is important, of course, but there has to be a strong leader as well, because someone has to lead it, right? And that's when the team follows. I'm just going to come back to something you talked about, Friends of Dorothy, and I just realized some of our listeners as well may not really know that term. So do you want to just explain what Friends of Dorothy actually means?
Well, that was the term that was used for those who were in the closet, basically in the 50s, really, which did link to Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. And that was the term that was then used for gay men. That was the term that was then used for gay men. But again, as I said, the younger generation now had no idea what that meant. But I think it was still really up until the late 90s or in even early 2000s that term was still used. And of course, by the older queer community, it still is used at times.
Sure. Thank you for that. And there is some information on this on our website as well, on our podcast as well, if you want to listen to it.
Great.
Friends, yeah, it's on our LinkedIn page, Older Queer Voices LinkedIn page, if you want to know more this is to our listeners. And you've got this fascinating career, part of which you have built as you've grown. I want to know where you are now. I love that Jovolution, by the way, Jovolution. What a brilliant name. So, what is it? What is it that you
Okay.
do, and where are you right now in life?
Okay, so Jovolution came through when I decided 2 years ago, after a wonderful 40-year plus corporate career in the travel industry with great brands, Disney, Thomas Cook, Royal Caribbean Group, Hertz Rent a Car, and a couple of startups along the way as well. I decided that I actually wanted to stop working as hard as I was from a from a corporate point of view. It was relentless. It was very enjoyable, and I wanted to leave a party having had a good time. I might have stayed for one too many, two too many, but I didn't want to stay until I was paralytic and carried out, which generally happens in corporate life if you hang on too long. But I had loads to give. I've got loads of energy. And I said, I'm not retiring, I'm evolving. And people assume because you hit a certain age that you might be retiring. I said, no, I'm not retiring. I have no intention probably of ever retiring, but I'm evolving. And because if you don't evolve, you become extinct. And through that, actually, with my wonderful ex-boss from Disney, we were walking along the beach one day, and I was talking about the evolution, how frustrating it is for me that people assume that you're retiring. And it just came to me, Jovolution. That's what I'm doing. Jo is evolving. So Jovolution came out. I hadn't formed a complete plan, that because I also didn't want to do that. I wanted to give myself time. I knew I wanted to give back. I knew I wanted to focus more on diversity, equity, and inclusion amongst leaders, and also with individuals. I wanted to give back to young people and students, and really show them the joys of a career in the travel industry, the LGBTQ community, etc. So from that, Jovolution was born. Jovolution, inspiring change. And basically, I do a lot of coaching and mentoring. I do strategy sessions with organizations as well, who are looking at where they're going, where they want to take the business to. And also very much I'm involved in a cruise career springboard, which is looking at younger people who probably aren't going to go to university, and getting them to see the joys of the cruise industry and the opportunities that there are within it, because not many people really think about that. So the cruise industry is very supportive of that. I've got many great friends throughout the whole of the cruise industry still. And I'm also very involved with WOW, Women of the World, and the foundation focused on equality and gender equality, and how much the better place the world will be if there's true equality in the world. For girls, women, non-binary, and for men and boys as well. So that's really what Jovolution is. It's evolving still. I do a lot of conference moderating and panel discussions, but I'm also then on the board of Hays Travel, which is the UK's largest, most independent travel organisation. Which is run by Dame Irene Hayes, who's an incredible, wonderful business with great culture and values. And I'm enjoying a variety of different things. And that's what Jovolution is all about.
Yeah, you're never going to retire. I can't see that happening, and I hope you never do retire in that way, because I think the world needs you, Jo. Yeah, no, really. You sound very. I mean, I was, like I said, when I was doing research on you, I saw tons and tons of information of you, and I'm thinking, who is this powerful woman? Like, you are a powerhouse, and I hope you know that. And
No, I don't think of myself as that. My key thing to me is really now, success to me now is really about giving back, helping people. And yes, and there's a commercial side to some of what I do as well, but a lot of Jovolution is about giving back.
Okay. And what's your website? It's
It's
www.
jovolution.com.
Okay, that's easy. JOVOLUTION.com.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
that's
That's it.
that's good to
Yeah.
know. And I remember exchanging a message with you where you said, "Now you're writing a book, right?"
Yes. Yes.
So please tell us about that book. I can't
So
wait.
the other thing that again I just didn't have time to do when I was in the big corporate world is I've always wanted to tell my parents' stories. So I've had my parents' lives in a box in the attic, and of letters from my grandparents in Berlin, who sadly did not escape and ended up in the camps. Letters from my father's family in Poland. And so my mother got out on the kinder transport. As I said, her parents sadly didn't make it. My mum and her sister did. And on my father's side, he was at the age of 14 in the Warsaw Uprising. He'd managed to survive. He was very ill, which is why they couldn't have children. And his brother and father were shot dead in front of his mother. And his mother was actually used as a human shield in front of the tanks. And so finally, together in collaboration with a very good author friend of mine, Janet Pywell, we have written a book on my parents' story, the life stories. It's called The Dash of Life. The dash being on our tombstones between our birth date and our death date. That dash has got such a story to tell, and yet it all ends up as a dash. And it's their story told through my eyes of their lives coming to London, to the UK as refugees, marrying, not being able to have children, adopting my brother and me, my brother's tough time with illness, me coming out, and it ends on both my parents, my father's death and then my mother's death. And then book 2 is going to be Nature versus Nurture, which is the story of my adoption and
Oh,
my
wow.
family story there.
So you have this
Yeah,
the dash of life. When is that
yeah.
out?
So we're looking to launch at the end of this year. So towards the end of this year, we're just
Brilliant.
finalising plans now, but we're getting ready for a launch into Q4 this year.
Brilliant, brilliant. Just keep us informed because I'd love for us to,
Definitely.
share the link with our listeners and our
Absolutely.
readers,
That
and
would be
also
wonderful.
maybe do an in conversation again, not
Yes.
online but offline, and do a
Yeah.
book launch with you. Would
That'd be
love to do
lovely.
that.
Thank you. Thank you
Absolutely,
very much.
absolutely happy. And book 2 as well. Whenever that's ready, we will talk about that again
Wonderful. Yes.
later.
Yes.
But
Yes.
before we conclude this very interesting and fascinating conversation, I want to know, how do you feel right now in terms of your own self? You've come a long way from the 21-year-old.
Yep.
And what would you like to say to those who are questioning themselves right now and feel that they cannot be fully themselves? No matter how many campaigns the organization runs,
Yeah.
how many role models people have, it's still a very, very daunting, thing to
Absolutely.
come out.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yes.
so if you're able to share
And I
something.
don't. I really don't underestimate that at all. I really don't. And so, first of all, I would say is that you're not alone. You're not alone. You can always find somebody that you can talk to and that you can trust, either be it online through safe channels, or through the community work that the LGBTQ plus community does, or through a trusted friend or colleague at work. Most people can find somebody that they feel that they can trust who can then really help them on that journey. And I do not underestimate that. I never ever thought that I would be as happy as I am today. My wonderful partner, Lynn, of 20 years now, is a major part of that. She literally is the wind beneath my wings, and I couldn't do what I do without her. So having that is very special. I never thought I would have that. I never thought I would find that level of love and personal happiness. And it's a great sadness to me, but that my parents didn't see that, because their big fear is that I would be unhappy. And yet I think I'm one of the happiest people on the planet, which is great. So I would say, don't underestimate it. There are people who you can trust. If anybody wants to reach out to me, I would always be more than happy to listen to people and talk to them. I know what it's like, and I don't underestimate it, but you can find it. And I'd never in a million years thought that I would end up having such a wonderful career. And then now moving on with Jovolution to focusing in on supporting diversity and equity inclusion, because now more than ever, the world needs it in a world of so much hate. There is more that unites us than divides us, and we've got to find those voices and speak out and stand out for those who can't.
This is absolutely, truly well said. And it's so beautiful, Jo. Really, really beautiful. I know a lot of our listeners will be, interested in knowing how your journey evolves further, from here on. So how do we keep in touch with you? Is it through your website, or is there a...
Yeah, and through LinkedIn as well. So
Okay.
through LinkedIn and through Instagram, but mostly through LinkedIn, and obviously through Jovolution as well. Definitely.
Okay. One last question before we finish this very, very exciting conversation is, do you have a special love story that you can share that has happened thanks to all these cruises you did, your travel? I'd love to know. So we can leave this on a really beautiful note.
Well, I think one of the lovely love stories actually was the work that we did with the all-inclusive photo project that we did, which was really, a lot of the travel imagery is still very much mum, dad, 2.4 kids, white, etc. And the world's not like that. The world has got lots of different shapes and sizes of families and lots of different colours. And we did this wonderful project called the All-Inclusive Photo Project. And from that, two gay couples actually did fall in love and both got married. So that was wonderful.
Oh, that's so beautiful to hear, Jo. And really, thank you so much for coming as a guest on our podcast and sharing so openly, so beautifully. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And is
Thank
there
you.
any last words you would like to share before I close this podcast?
I just really think, again, those of us who can stand up, speak out. People need us now more than ever, and when their voices aren't heard, and we need to do that. We owe it to all of them.
Brilliant. On that note, Jo, I want to say that your story is a powerful reminder, at least for me, and I'm sure to our listeners as well, that visibility matters. But also
Absolutely.
that, yeah, and also that change often happens because people within systems choose to challenge them as well. I mean, change just doesn't happen by being silent. So from navigating your own journey as a queer woman, and I know you said gay woman in business, to helping reshape an entire industry, to be inclusive, to have a voice, to embody. I think this is amazing, and thank you very much. I feel that your lived experiences, what you've shown to us is resilience, and I don't know where that comes from. And you've created space for a lot of people, and thank you for that. And to our listeners, if you want to share feedback, share the podcast, you want to comment, you want to nominate yourself, or you want to nominate someone you know on the podcast, you know where to reach us, theviewsroom@gmail.com. Thank you very much, and I look forward to our next time. Thank you, Jo.
Thank you very much. Thank you.